Hi, everyone, and welcome to Bad Blind Moms, where we are just two blind moms doing our best and probably getting it all wrong. I'm Stacy Cervenka, and I live in Lincoln, Nebraska with my husband, Greg, who is also blind, and our two children, Leo and Josephine, who are sighted. And unfortunately, my co-host, Bridget Kenning-Pole-Peter, is not feeling well tonight. So this week, unfortunately for you all, it is just me and our two amazing badass blind mom guests. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We have Lisa Johnson and Priscilla Yeung. Lisa, do you want to go first?
Sure. My name is Lisa Johnson, and I live in Omaha, Nebraska, and I'm the mom of 7 children, ranging in age from 4 to 15, 5 girls and 2 boys. And I'm the Director of Student Support Services for Nebraska Methodist College in Omaha, Nebraska.
Amazing. Priscilla,
Hi,
what are you up to?
Hi, I'm Priscilla Yeung, and I'm from Sacramento, California. And I have 2 kids, Miria, who's 13, and my son Isaiah, who's 12. And I currently work at the Society for the Blind as the Senior Impact Project Manager. And I'm so glad to be here tonight.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. We really appreciate it. We've had you guys on in the past, and you are such a wealth of knowledge and insight that we're so excited to have you back. So tonight, we're going to talk about something that weighs on the minds of pretty much all moms from the moment you begin thinking about getting pregnant. And that is labor, delivery, and birth in general. And people who are blind, people who are blind and low vision and who have disabilities in general often have particular concerns along these areas. Often before we even consider getting pregnant, we are thinking about what we might run into in the hospital when it comes to our labor and delivery. So we wanted to talk a little bit about that tonight. And to start things out, I guess I want to start by saying that it's very common for blind and low vision people, when they think about parenthood, the first thing they may feel is fear that, oh my goodness, what if social services gets involved? Or what if, the doctors doubt my ability to be a parent? And I think that so often that's almost the first thing that, I used to be the president of the blind parents group of the NFB. And I probably got more calls about that than anything else. People saying, I want to be a mom one day. My husband and I are thinking about getting pregnant. Do you think I'll run into problems with social services? And is that something either of you guys thought about when you were beginning to think about having a family? Did you guys have any concerns, whether it's about that or about anything else, when it came to beginning to think about becoming a parent?
Lisa, do you want to go first?
You can go first. It sounds like you have definitely an experience.
Well, for me, I like to plan things out. So even trying to get pregnant, I felt like, we were planning and we thought about it, but I could never have expected what I encountered, which was my experience at the labor and delivery, actually having a baby and then being questioned by the social worker about if I was even capable of taking care of my baby. And imagine just, having a baby, and I had an emergency C-section. I was very overwhelmed already, probably hadn't slept for like 36 hours or something crazy like that. So, my anxiety level was probably really high at that moment. I can't even remember exactly everything that happened. That was the thing. Now that I'm talking about it, it was just like a wave of stress just kind of came over me. And then to be questioned by a social worker, the day after about if I was fit to be a mom was very stressful. And I didn't expect it to happen because I thought that, being able to just show that I can come into the hospital room with my cane, and I thought that I would be able to talk my way out of it and just, it would be a normal situation, but it really turned out to be a very stressful situation.
Now, where did you give birth, Priscilla, if you don't mind me asking?
UC Davis.
Medical Center.
Medical Center, yeah. And so one of the issues was challenging was it's a teaching hospital. So a lot of interns would come in, doctors would come in, and it would be a different person talking to me. I felt like every 12 hours. And so repeat my story, re-explain myself over and over again about how I felt like I could take care of my baby, and really had to defend myself, which was challenging because, again, we just had a baby. It was a stressful situation. You know, I think all moms in the beginning, we don't exactly know what's happening. My first pregnancy, first birth, everything was just chaotic. And so I'm going into that situation and being questioned, you know, about my capabilities, and being afraid that they're going to take my baby away, that was the, you know, the end outcome that was awaiting me. It was very scary.
You know, it's amazing, Priscilla, how similar our experiences are, because as you know, my husband and I live in Nebraska now, but we used to live in Sacramento with Priscilla.
Yeah.
Not with Priscilla, but in the same city. We lived in her basement. But we also gave birth at UC Davis Medical Center, and my husband and I are blind. And, you know, when I went into, you know, I'm a very planful person. I'm very anal. And so when I would say I gave birth to our child in 2013. And in 2010, a story broke out in the Kansas City area of a couple where both of them were blind, and they had difficulty breastfeeding. And the lactation consultant put something in their charts saying that, you know, the baby lacked custody. And so they sent a social worker, and the social worker said that she couldn't in good conscience send a baby home with a blind couple. And so because of that, they would not allow the baby to go home with, you know, its parents. And the parents had to fight for the next 2 months to get their child back.
Oh my God.
They were only allowed supervised visitation. I'm not even sure they were allowed to hold the baby. This was the child that she had carried for 9 months. And they did end up getting the child back at basically, I think it was its 2-month birthday. And what's so sad about that is, I mean, I cannot even imagine what it would be like to lie in bed at night wondering where my baby was, like where this baby that was with me in such an intimate way, and now was completely yanked from me. And I mean, I even think about like having gone through a late miscarriage, that was my mindset. Like the baby was with me, and then all of a sudden I didn't know where it was. And I can only imagine this mother laying there thinking like, whoa, like last night I had you inside of me, and now I have no idea where you are. And so luckily, after all the hearings and, you know, the parents were able to prove that they could provide a loving, you know, stable home for the baby. So they got the baby back after 2 months. But what I noticed among a lot of my friends who were blind and low vision and were around my age, we all started talking about home birth. And we all started talking about having a lawyer on call when we went to the hospital. And this wasn't because we like had always wanted to have a baby at home. It was because we were afraid to go to the hospital. It wasn't because we wanted to do some, birth at home kind of thing because it was our dream. It was, we were too afraid to go to the hospital. And that's just not acceptable. And so I really felt like, and this was in 2010, and my husband and I, he was my husband my fiance at the time, husband now, I would lie awake in bed. I would lie awake at night and think, my whole life, I've always thought I would be a mom, but am I gonna have that dream ripped away? And so when I went into the hospital, I had lawyers in my phone, like their numbers in my phone. And I had a copy of the National Federation of the Blind has a pamphlet called Parenting Without Sight. I ordered several of them. They're like a little book and they're free. And I put a whole bunch of them in my hospital bag so that if anyone gave me any crap, I could like hand them. And they're specifically designed for social service and medical professionals. So I was ready to like encounter something. But even when I did, it was so traumatic. Like Priscilla mentions, UC Davis is a teaching hospital. And so like Priscilla, I had, I went through 28 hours of labor. I was exhausted. I was in pain. The first night, the nurse was helping me a lot, and I thought that was normal. So I let her. Like, I let her do almost everything because I thought that, like, that's what the nurse did. Because back in my parents' day, that is what the nurse did. The nurse helped you and you went to the nursery. And so I didn't think anything of it. And then that next morning, she put in.
Now that you're talking about it, she helped me too. I thought that was normal too. It's not normal.
And it should be, because mom, so I had hyperemesis gravidarum. I hadn't had a good night's sleep in like 6 months. And then I had 28 hours of labor. I was tired. Yeah, someone should take my baby and take it to the nursery and give me a minute to sleep if I want that. And so, so she put in that we needed 100% assistance. And you know what, frankly, even if we had needed 100% assistance that first night, so what? Like, give us a break. So then I wake up, and in a semicircle around my bed, I open my eyes, and there's a horseshoe around my bed of residents, interns, doctors, med students, I don't know, Girl Scouts, I don't know, but like, not Girl Scouts, but I mean, like you said, it's a teaching hospital. So everyone who's like affiliated with the program is standing around my bed. And the doctor says, we need to have a reality-based conversation. And I was like, oh no. So she began like just interrogating me with questions. I mean, I felt like I was in a lineup, like I was exhausted, I was in pain, and they were throwing questions at me. And I had to be like, it was so hard because I was so tired. I was in so much pain, yet this was probably the most important conversation of my life. And I had to be like on it and know the answers. She did like my answers. She seemed to think that maybe Greg and I had never even considered that we would have to take care of the baby, because when I answered all her questions, she was like, "Oh, well, I'm glad to hear you thought about it." And it's like you just thought I waddled in here 8 months pregnant and had given no thought to how, and so she said, "But we still want you to have a conversation with the social worker to make a plan, because we need to know that you are capable of taking care. Oh, we want you to know that you are capable of taking care of this baby. And we need to know that you are capable of taking care of this baby." And so luckily, that was actually the hard part. The social worker came in and she was with us for 10 minutes. She asked us a bunch of questions. She learned that Greg and I were not addicted to drugs. We were, not wanted by the law. We had a place for the baby to sleep. And then she left 10 minutes later, and we never heard anything again. But it was so terrifying, because if I didn't have some of the knowledge that I have, I could have been in the same position as those people in Kansas City. I mean, it's really just luck.
And I'm so proud of you for having all that foreknowledge. I wish that I had that. I really didn't think that it was going to happen to me. And in the end, I can't remember, it's a blur, but I think I lied. I think I lied about my vision. And I think I told them that I could see a little bit, because I was so scared. And I didn't know
right. Yeah, no, I get it. And, I look at it now, and I just think and after that, Greg and I were so terrified to ask for any assistance from the doctors and the nurses. And I feel like, as new parents, they should have been a resource to us. I should have felt comfortable asking the nurses, "Hey, can you remind me how to swaddle the baby?" Or, "Hey, do you have advice about this or that?" And so instead of utilizing the resources that were all around me, the nurses and so forth, we felt terrified of everyone, that we just needed to hunker down and get our butts out of there. Yeah. And so it was just such a wasted opportunity.
Yeah. I just wish that they could have seen the situation as just, we were new moms, and every new mom, we have questions, and we're not experts, right? We're here to learn and to gain skills so that we can take care of our babies.
No, absolutely. And Lisa, I want to get to, I do want to say that it's interesting, Priscilla, that we actually had very similar experiences at UC Davis Medical Center. And I also think, and I'm curious about you, Lisa, that, there's this whole thing called the Baby Friendly USA or whatever it is. And they have all these new kind of methodologies and all these new procedures and things that hospitals have to have in place in order to get this certification that apparently some hospitals want. And part of it is that all babies room in with the new mothers. And I think that's wonderful if that's what I don't think they should be prohibited from rooming in with the mothers. But I think doing away with the nurseries in general, I mean, it's just, that's like torture for the moms. Like, why would you do that? You know, I mean,
I think there is no shame in saying I'm really tired. I haven't slept for days, hours. Having a good night's rest can really just shift everything in one's mood and important to be able to recognize that. And
it's interesting because of this nursery issue, there's studies that have shown that there's been a huge, there's been a huge uptick in head injuries to newborns because exhausted mothers drop them. Like, exhausted mothers are physically dropping their babies. Obviously accidentally, because they're so tired. Yeah. And something similar than that happened to me. I was breastfeeding my son and I fell asleep. And I mean, it's a miracle. And I woke up with him across my lap with his head dangling off my lap, it's a miracle that he did not fall. And I mean, he fell asleep between me unbuttoning my gown and putting him to my breast. Like, it happened that quick because I was that tired. And so I'm just a firm believer in nurseries being available to moms who want them. But that's my spiel. So Lisa, how you feel? How when you were going into labor, what were some of the things? Did you have any concerns that were blindness related, and how did you manage those concerns? Or
yes, so I think I had when I initially found out I was pregnant for the first time, I definitely went in to my appointments on the defense, like feeling like I needed to be on the defensive already and like be prepared to justify everything. But actually, like, after hearing your two stories, I think that my first 6 birthing experiences were pretty amazing. I was in a much smaller, like, little Catholic hospital with midwives, and like, we had the midwives that had taken care of me all the way through my pregnancy were the ones delivering our babies. And so we had known them and had time almost to prove my, I guess mostly it was me, not my husband, but prove my ability to them. And just they got to see that I was like this normal person, and I was a teacher, and I was a grad student, and then I was, getting my PhD, and they saw that happening through the course of the first 6 pregnancies that I had in Wisconsin at this smaller hospital, always with midwives. Our first encounter with social services and with the real doubt happened when we came to Omaha. And even though we were on our 7th pregnancy at that time, that was the first time that we had an encounter with social services. And it was actually with our infant that was a little older, our 6th child. We moved to Omaha and then had social services get involved at that time and had a visit to our home. And it was because prior to moving to Omaha, just a couple of weeks prior to that, and our daughter was about maybe 10 months old, there'd been a terrible storm at where we were living, and a tree fell on our house, and where I was staying with my grandparents. And in the process of getting my grandparents out of the house and my kids, while this tree was inside the house and it was storming, I fell with the baby on the steps. And in the process of trying to protect her head, I cradled her in a certain way and I protected her head, but her leg got broke. And the doctors that took care of us in Wisconsin were they knew the situation, but then we moved here in the process of Anna needing, getting her cast on in Wisconsin, but coming to Omaha and needing it taken off.
Because your husband had taken a new job at a university in Omaha.
Yes. So we moved here because of Jeremy's job, and then we needed to go to the hospital to have to Omaha Children's to have her cast taken off and have a follow-up with an orthopedic surgeon. And that's when the questions started, like, oh, you're new to the area. Why did you move here? What happened to her leg? We want to see the medical records.
Oh my God.
We'd like to talk to some of the witnesses that were there when this happened. This seems like an unlikely story.
They said that to you? They said this
yes.
seems like an unlikely story.
Yes. So my husband took my daughter to get her cast off, never thinking anything would happen. And then they questioned him, and then they wouldn't let him leave with the baby. And he was called, like, I was at work. I was teaching here in Omaha at the time. And like, he called me and he's like, I think we have a problem.
And your husband can see, by the way, your husband happens to be fully sighted.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they were saying, like, we're not sure that your wife is capable of taking care of the baby. You know, is this really what happened? Jeremy wasn't there, of course, because he was here in Omaha when all of this unfolded.
Wow.
So it was
he
like
moved to Omaha a little bit before you.
A year.
Yes.
Yeah. So he'd already been here for, you know, almost 10 months at this time. And so they were like, well, you don't really know what was happening when you weren't there. Are you sure your wife is really capable? This, you know, so they were really interrogating
him.
And
six other children already that were amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your oldest one at that point would be a teenager, right? Or how old was Nevaeh? She would be.
She was a fifth grader.
A fifth grader. So I mean,
so like 11, about to turn 12. And yes, we had never had any instances ever. And then we moved to this bigger city. And so, like, as you're talking about your experiences in this bigger hospital, and then I'm reflecting, like, and then we moved to Omaha. And then that's when the questions started. And you know, with the encounter with social services, with our daughter Anna's cast. And then I went through a lot of questions when I got pregnant with our 7th child. We were not planning for a 7th baby. We had thought we were like kind of moving on with kids, and 6 was plenty, but we were so blessed with Namila. But during that pregnancy, I like, it took 3 OBs before I found someone that I felt comfortable with. The first OB kind of asked me some questions at Nebraska Medical Center, and it seemed just like I could tell that maybe there was some doubt. And then I switched to midwives, and they said that they didn't feel comfortable taking care of me. And they just, like, every appointment, I stayed with them for a few appointments, and every appointment was more about my vision and less about the pregnancy. And I'm like, I didn't come here for an interrogation of my vision. I came here for you to check up on the baby. But it was
my
just
baby
like,
lives in my uterus, not my eyes.
Yeah. And so it was like rehashing my visual impairment every single appointment. And I'm like, this is nuts. And so about 3 months or so before we had Namila, I got transferred to an OB and ended up being a high risk pregnancy. And my high risk doctor was like incredible.
Why are high risk doctors so great? Like, I always feel like every time, because both my pregnancies ended up being high risk, and like whenever you would go to the high risk folks, like maybe it's because they see so much that, like, but I mean, I always feel like they're incredible. They're just like a breath of fresh air in many ways. Like,
but I think I was prepared for like an interrogation, and I honestly deliberately wore so I went and I was a patient at Methodist Women's in Omaha, and I am also an employee of Methodist Health System. And so I happened to have my my first appointment with my high risk OB like later in the afternoon on a work day, and I wore my work badge there on purpose, because I was like, maybe that will validate that I'm like a capable person.
Which is
it's like ridiculous to have to think that way.
I mean, you have to acknowledge the ableist and classist system that exists, and unfortunately, as wrong as you think it is, you have to roll with it, or it might really affect your family.
You got to play the game. Yeah, it's like this game that you have to play, and I never throw around titles ever, but I'm like, oh, it's Dr. Lisa Johnson, you know, like
because Lisa is a PhD, P.S.
I am a PhD with 2 master's degrees and a bachelor's degree. And like, I hate throwing around credentials. That's not my MO at all. Like, I hate that. But I felt like there were times during like pregnancy here in Omaha, and then dealing with our kids stuff since we moved to Omaha, that I've had to, you know, use the title thing and validate my, like, all the things I do, just to make sure that our kids are going to be safe. And it's ridiculous to have to do that.
And you know, it's interesting because my water broke with Leo when I was at 8 weeks, and I was actually at work and my water broke. So I went into the office wearing, you know, like a, you know, business casual / business attire dress with with pumps. But the interesting thing is, yes, some people might have seen me walk in with, you know, my work attire, but eventually you're stripped down to that hospital gown. And so any like class signifiers kind of vanish. Like maybe you have a manicure or pedicure, but you're not wearing, like, no one knows. I mean, your clothes are gone. You're not wearing much jewelry. I mean, there's not much for them to see that, okay, this person is a college graduate or this person has a professional job. And
you have your words,
regardless.
Though. I mean, then you just like you fall back on your words.
You better start talking extremely eloquently. And then the other thing though too is that when I would tell people about my experience, there were people in Sacramento who would say, oh, but you know, UC Davis that's where they have to have all the people on Medicaid and all, that's the county. And it's like, well, how is that okay? I don't care if you're on Medicaid or it's the county hospital that takes in people who are low income or teenage pregnancies. Does that then make it okay to treat people like that? Like, how is that the answer? Like, oh yeah, that's just UC Davis. They usually have the folks who are, you know, addicted or something. Like, Okay, so Lisa and Priscilla, what is one thing that you wish you would have done when you went into, you know, the hospital for the first time for labor and delivery? Like, is there something that you did with your first child that you learned from and did differently with your subsequent children? Or is there something that even after, you know, having 7 children, or in Priscilla's case, 2 children, is there something that you would still do differently were you to have to do it again? I guess Priscilla?
Okay. I guess I just always thought that I would, you know, have these visions of having a perfect birth story or everything going smoothly. But I think, you know, if I were to do it again, I think I would tell myself just to relax and be prepared for anything that comes my way, and to ask for help if I needed to, and to speak up for myself. I think a lot of times I've had the doctors and the nurses at UC Davis just, you know, because I assumed that they were the experts, that they knew what they were doing. But really, I probably should have taken more control of my own situation and be able to advocate for myself more fully and to go in more prepared as a blind person, just knowing that I have people behind me who also have gone through this experience and I could draw on their wisdom, and to be able to speak up for myself when I felt like things weren't right.
Lisa, what would you do differently, or did you do differently after your first experience?
Well, first of all, I think I want to reiterate what Priscilla said about recognizing that, like, your voice matters in your birth experience. And yes, it is okay to ask for help, but when you when you need to be an advocate for yourself, like don't be afraid to speak up for yourself. I have a really amazing had in Wisconsin, a really amazing eye doctor. And she said to another one of my doctors once, if Lisa's telling you something isn't right, like, you need to listen to that, because like, I'm not that person that like cries wolf over things or like overreacts. In fact, I probably am an underreacting person for the most part. And so, like, trust your gut. If something doesn't feel right, speak up for yourself. ask for help when needed. It isn't, I think that's what I give it as advice. And I mean, the other thing about 7 kids versus, you know, like I honestly, like, I don't feel like that out had made me better like any other time, because I went in like having this mindset, like, oh, I've done this before 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 more times. And like my 7th pregnancy was like, blew everything out of the water, and like nothing went okay. And like everything was so different every time that it doesn't matter how many times you do it, you might kind of know what to expect. Like maybe the pain, or like the, you know, just the how things unfold and all of that. But in the end, like every labor is its own beast, and you just have to be ready for it and adaptable. And for people like me, and it sounds like for people like Stacy who like to plan everything, you kind of have to let go of that and be ready to change when needed.
And I think that's part of why, you know, because I'm so planful and I'm so, you know, I want to control everything, that I think that's in some ways why I really need a doctor that I can trust, and I can just say, tell me what to do, and then believe them, like, or else I'll just drive myself nuts. And I think part of that is why I didn't read a lot of pregnancy books. I got through half of a childhood book and decided I decided it was boring and I wanted to read like novels or something. So, I mean, like, part of it is like, because I'm so controlled in most parts of my life, and this is such an important thing, I almost needed to just find someone who is an expert and that I trusted, and trust them. And I know that sounds weird and it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but I would agree as far as what I did differently with my second, you know, my youngest labor and delivery, was advocate for myself and be very clear upfront what I wanted. I switched hospitals. I went to Mercy General, and they just a much better experience. And for me personally, I told them, I said, look, I want to let you know, I don't want to breastfeed. I don't even want the lactation consultants to visit me. Like, because last time I went through so much pain and it was so difficult and I was so exhausted. And I know that exhaustion triggered my postpartum depression. I need to relax. I need to take care of myself. And my husband will be doing most of the baby care. And they actually understood that. And we're like, you know what? Thank you for telling us. We'll be sure to help your husband in any way that we can, not because he's blind, but because, like, you know, thank you for telling us that you have struggled with postpartum, and that you know that you need to rest up physically and mentally, because I had a very challenging pregnancy. You know, I was on bed rest for quite a while. And so they understood that I was tired, and they were like, thank you for telling us this. So the lactation consultant did not visit me. Greg did all the diapering, almost all of the feeding. And you know, they gave me the baby. I would love on her. I would kiss her. I would snuggle with her, but everyone was just like, Mama, you rest up. And so when I came home from the hospital, I was just in such a better place, because I was well rested and I felt happy, and I didn't feel like, you know, all the hospital only saw me as a pair of boobs that, like, well, the boobs are working well, so obviously Mama's fine. Now let's just care about the baby, you know? So I don't know, and that might not be your experience or what you want, but the point being, advocate for yourself and go in and say, this is what I want. This is what's important to me, and let them know in advance.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think my second experience, I was much more ready to advocate for myself. And that actually turned out to be an emergency C-section with an ambulance ride and a placenta abruption. And the next thing I knew, my baby was in the NICU, and we were there for a whole month. And so I think that was a whole entirely different experience as a blind mom, being in the NICU every day, and having to learn my way around the NICU, to, you know, a lot of things were inaccessible, like I couldn't read the baby monitor, things like that. But just being able to ask and say, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I want, and asking the nurses, getting to know the nurses a lot, and just being able to have them trust me so that I can hold the baby and be a part of the care.
I think that's so true. I also, my second pregnancy and my 5th and my 7th all ended in NICU stays for the kids. And that is a different experience too. I think that's why I really have truly said like 1 pregnancy or 7 pregnancies, you just never know what to expect. I mean, I had 6 also perfectly natural, wonderful, I mean, natural deliveries. And then I had this crazy emergency C-section also, and both the baby and I almost died. And like, that was like traumatic too. And then you're, so you just never know.
Yep.
So being an advocate is so important.
Whatever it is that means for you, whether it means you want to room in with your baby, or you want someone else to care for your baby while you rest up, or you are committed to breastfeeding, or you want formula from the beginning and you don't want any shit. Like whatever that is for you, you have to advocate,
Yeah.
So what is one thing that you guys, like if you could give, labor and delivery professionals, advice about how to improve their quality of care for people who are blind and low vision, what would that advice be?
So I think, you go first.
Okay. I think first and foremost, being able to see blind parents as fully capable, functioning adults, and who just are new parents, or maybe parents who have many kids, so we're experts at that point, right? So being able to come from the perspective that they're just parents and not have to be in a situation where we always have to reiterate our eye condition, when really we're here for a checkup with the baby, but we're spend hours, minutes more talking about our own personal eye condition. So if we could be able to switch that and just see us as parents, expected parents, I think that would go a long way.
So for me, I think what's innately interesting about my work environment right now is that I get the opportunity to work with future nurses every day. And so I think I've had the opportunity to have lots of conversations with students who will soon be nurses. And then when I was actually delivering our 7th, I was being cared for by current students. And I think that alone, that ability for them to see me like as just an average person when they see me in my office working with them has helped them to understand like, oh my gosh, that, like this is just one characteristic, and it's not defining the kind of parent I can be or my experience as a patient. But I've had a lot of conversations with students about the necessity of like making sure that you take the time to listen to the patient. And you may know medically what might be the best thing, but the patient is the expert on their lives and may have their own very important and valid reasons for needing things just so. And just taking time to ask questions and not make assumptions about their needs is so critically important.
And I think for me, it would be kind of similar to what Lisa is saying, is each patient is such an individual, and the mother is your patient just as much as the baby. And it's not that it seems like the mother is your patient until the baby is born, and then the baby is your patient and the mother is, basically the baby's nanny now, and so I think, making sure that the mother is also, keep in mind that the mother is a patient as well, and being flexible. And, I talked earlier about, how important I think it is for hospitals to have nurseries. My mom was a labor and delivery nurse at a large hospital in suburban Chicago, and they did away with the nursery for a while because I guess it's the newfangled thing to do. But it was so unpopular that the women on the hospital's board of directors and advisory board and the women in the community were so upset that they actually brought the nursery back. And I'm aware of several dozen hospitals that have actually just like gotten rid of their baby friendly certifications for that reason, that people want those nurseries. They want that option, and not that it's not okay for parents to room in, but that it needs to be the mother's decision. And it's, in a way, I feel like it's ableist to expect that every mom is going to be able to do that right away. It's just not, and it's, I guess, misogynistic in a way. I mean, I think it's cruel toward women, that we're not thinking of the woman as the patient. Like, the baby is now out of her, and so we're not going to take care of her anymore. Now we're going to make it as hard for her as we possibly can. So for me, it's just, remember that the woman is your patient too. And, and she's, she needs your care as well. So final, I guess, now I know, again, I used to be the chairperson of the Blind Parents Group of the National Federation of the Blind. And it was very common for me to get calls from people who are considering becoming parents. And they would say, do you think I could become a parent, or do you think that they would just take it away from me? And I had to tell them that, actually, most blind parents, I mean, don't run into really significant, challenges at the hospital. Thankfully, the ADA does offer some protection to blind parents and parents with disabilities. And more states are passing legislation that, make abundantly clear the rights of parents with disabilities. So hopefully all 50 states will have them shortly. So yes, legally, you should not run into issues. Of course, we know you sometimes will, but luckily in this day and age, most blind parents don't have their children taken away at birth. That's why the situation in Kansas City was so unusual, and it did make national news, because it getting that far where the baby was actually taken from their custody, that really isn't very common anymore. It does happen, but it's very uncommon. Right now, the majority of custody challenges that blind and low vision parents face are when there's a divorce or a separation. And especially if one of the parents is sighted, and then they may try to use the parents' blindness against them. But you see much more challenges to custody at divorce than you do at birth. So my piece of advice to new parents who are considering parenthood is that, don't let this be the reason that you don't do it. Don't let your fear of social service agencies or family court or anything be the reason that you don't have a child. My issue with Leo, it was incredibly traumatizing, with that whole, the team at UC Davis. But man, that was almost 8 years ago now. That was one day. There have been thousands of days since then. So don't let one, or even a few really crappy days scare you from doing what you want to do. And, learn the laws in your state, learn what your advocacy opportunities, what resources you have, and don't let that be the reason that it stops you. It's very unlikely that you will not leave the hospital with your baby. You might talk to a social worker. You might have to explain things to some people. You might have to just, do whatever you got to do to get out of that hospital. But it's very unlikely that you won't leave the hospital with your baby the day that you should. So Priscilla, what would be your advice to parents who are considering or blind people who are considering having children, or people who are pregnant and concerned about what their labor and delivery experience might look like?
I think just talk to other blind parents that are further down the path, and just learn from them, and to know that you can do it. And if there's any questions about how, practice, spend time with, other babies, or visit the family, and find out how they do things. And I think getting a little bit more knowledge and confidence in your own abilities can help you advocate for yourself.
Lisa, what piece of advice would you give to people, labor and delivery, I guess, related advice to people who are considering becoming parents, or who are pregnant and expecting?
I think Priscilla brings up a really good point, that you're not alone in this journey. Like, social media is actually, I think, really helped to bring people together, even across the miles, because there's several groups on Facebook and other platforms where blind parents or blind soon-to-be parents are posting questions, and other blind individuals who are further along on their journey of parenthood are offering great pieces of advice. So utilize those, those individuals that are out there, and very happy to help, because I mean, I didn't have that when I was a mom and for the first time, and had to kind of figure it out myself. But now with social media, I think that really helps bring experts and non-experts and people with questions and people with answers together. And the other piece is, and if you, I guess in my case, like I kind of referenced this a little while back, but sometimes you just have to play the game and say what you need to say to appease the medical professionals if you find yourself in that situation. Or like in my case, I had to throw around my PhD credentials or whatever, even though I hate doing that. Like sometimes you just have to say and do what you need to, because you know you can do it. You just have to appease people to be able to walk out of the hospital and get on with your life and do the things that you can do.
Sometimes you have to play into the elitist system. And I know for me, that meant like, if that means that you have to put on a certain air of professionalism, or, I mean, even though you should not have to have that, you should not have to be using $50 words and talking like you're at a professional conference. You shouldn't. It's not, I mean, it's not okay. But if you are able to do that, you might want to, I mean, you know, you don't want to be that person, but I mean,
yeah,
it's an elitist system. It's sometimes it can come down to that, or, you know, meeting with the social worker. So.
Yeah. For me, you know, playing the game meant just trying to say the right things when I'm supposed to say the right things, even when it had to come down to defending what I could see and what I couldn't see, or what I could do and what I could not do. Even maybe I had questions about, well, yeah, maybe I didn't exactly know how to do something, but I definitely tried to convince them that I could do it.
Because you knew you could learn. You, like any
I knew I could learn. Yeah.
And as far as saying, it doesn't matter whether, you knew that it doesn't matter whether you can see something or not, that, you know, totally blind people are parents all the time. I mean, my husband's totally blind, you know what I mean? Like, obviously.
Yeah.
But.
And you can always reach out to your safe people later. I think that's what, like, you know, if I was encountering nurses at the hospital that didn't know me, but then I always knew, like, I could reach out to my midwives who I did have a relationship with, and I could feel okay asking questions of them because we'd had time to build a relationship, or they knew like that I wasn't asking because I was incapable. I was asking because I wanted to learn.
Yeah. And that's it. I know, like, for us, you know, we learned how to swaddle at one of our parenting classes, but you know, you learn it, you do it 1 week, and then the next week it's something else. And then when the baby's actually in your arms, you're like, wait, I do what? I make a triangle and I fold it under his chin. Like, what's going on? So it's like,
and they're moving and it's so much harder.
Right. And you're like, wait, where was I supposed to tuck this? And it's like, you want to be able to just ask the nurses, like, sorry, can you help me remember how to swaddle? But at the same point, you're like, oh God, if the nurses come and they see that I'm struggling with it, are they going to write that down on some chart? And I'm going to hear about it later, you know? So,
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for, again, talking with us. I know Bridget wished she could be here, and we'll have to have you on again when it can be the four of us.
Thanks for having me. Great topic.
All right. Well, thank you. And we hope you'll share some of your experiences with us, you know, either on our YouTube page or Facebook or Twitter. And of course, you can find us on Twitter at Bad Blind Moms, Facebook, Bad Blind Moms, YouTube, Bad Blind Moms. All right. Talk to you later.